webinar. It's great to see you all, and I see many are coming in still. See you all joining us from across Europe for the kickoff of our webinar series. So this is just the beginning. Today, but also Wednesday and Thursday this week, we invite you to upgrade your lunch break with 3 practical sessions on digital energy. So my name is Matilde. I'm the project coordinator of the Everyone project. It's a Horizon Europe initiative, bringing together 11 partners from the UK, the Netherlands, Portugal, Greece, Germany, Austria, and Belgium. So I am based in Brussels. I work for Flux 50, it's the regional innovation network in Cleantech, where we accelerate the energy transition. So in our daily work, we see that technological innovation is moving fast. But innovation alone is not enough. We need to ensure these digital energy solutions actually reach the market, that organizations understand them, trust them, and know how to use them. And that is exactly what Everyone is about. So the mission of the project is to upskill people and organizations to navigate the rapidly changing energy landscape and to help turn complexity into opportunity. In this project, we focus on all market actors, so from solution providers to SMEs, energy communities, and end users, which are also all in scope of these 3 webinars. Over the past 3 years, when we started the Everyone project, we have analyzed the learning needs of these stakeholders. We assessed the maturity of digital energy solutions across European markets, and we identified what is needed to accelerate the uptake. The insights are available in our reports, all published on the Everyone website, so I invite you to have a look. And at the end of today's session, we'll also briefly introduce you to the Knowledge Hub, which we developed to translate those insights into practical learning tools. So today, it's really about making digital energy tangible. What does it mean for you as an SME? What role can you play? And how does it influence your investment decisions? After the 2 presentations, we also organize a short quiz with 5 questions to check if our efforts are effective and if you have actually learned something on digital energy. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our 2 speakers who will both bring practical insights to these questions. We'll start with Marc Vermeeren from Flux 50. He's my colleague working in many European projects on digital energy. And he'll be followed by Leen Peeters, founder and business developer of ThinkE and also initiator of this project. They'll both share their experience on this topic of digital energy and flexibility solutions. So let's get started. Marc, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matilde. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. I will focus today on some backgrounds of the energy markets, how it works, and how flexibility can mean euros in your case. So a short introduction, then the changing electricity system, the day-ahead market where prices are defined for the next day, dynamic price contracts to allow you to use those different prices. We discover where flexibility can be in your processes. If not in the processes, you can also use energy buffers. And the intelligence, the digital aspect is the AMS. The energy management system allows you to convert your flexibility into euros. A short disclaimer, so it's mainly about understanding the principles. Sometimes I take a little shortcut to make the high-level ID more clear. The presentation contains a lot of examples based on markets in Belgium and the Netherlands, but in most countries similar mechanisms exist. And there's an organization, ENSOE, that tries to standardize the mechanisms between and the markets between the different European countries. So first, an important thing is a reminder about what is electricity in kilowatts and what is electricity in kilowatt hours. There's often a misunderstanding of this, so that's the reason why I presented here. So power is kilowatts and energy is kilowatt hours. So when we have a device that consumes 1 kilowatt during 1 hour, it consumes 1 kilowatt hour. So when you talk about batteries, a battery can deliver power at a certain speed. So in this case, 5 kilowatts, and it can contain 10 kilowatt hours of energy. So the number of kilowatt hours within the battery, the size of the battery, is based on kilowatt hours, so energy content. When you compare it with a car, you can charge an EV with a charge of 22 kilowatt hours, for example. You can do that in two ways. You can do it with a fast charging on 11 fast home charger at 11 kilowatts. Then you need 2 hours to have this 22 kilowatt hours into your battery. You can also use a slow charging at 3.7 kilowatts, 16 amperes, and then you need 6 hours. Of course, you can also do it much faster, but that's out of the scope. On the right side, you see already a graphical presentation of what flexibility is. So in the blue indicators, that's 11 kilowatt that you charge your car when you come at home, and between 6 and 8 in the evening, you run full speed. So that will cost a lot of money, but you can also have the same number of kilometers into your battery when you do it during the night in slow charging. And we will see that this is really an example of flexibility, so moving the consumption to a cheaper moment. And during night, typically it's much cheaper than during the evening peak. So that's kilowatt versus kilowatt hour. Remember this maybe for the quiz. Another element that I want to look at is a typical invoice, a yearly invoice for an SME. So in this case, it's an Vermeeren, so the regulator in Belgium has defined the typical SME as one with this number of kilowatt hours during day, during night, and a peak of 18 kilowatts. In that case, the energy costs in 2024 was, like we have seen here, in total 7,500 euros. But what is important for the rest of the presentation is that 57% of the cost of this invoice is based on the real kilowatt hours, and 80% and 12% of the invoice is based on the peak. So if we want to lower the invoice, then we can look for reducing the number of kilowatt hours. That's one thing, but we are not looking at energy efficiency today. But you can also reduce the cost of a kilowatt hour. That is what we are looking for later on. And you can also try to reduce the peak usage of the grids. Both will help in reducing the energy bill. Okay, so the changing electricity system, most people, I think everybody already knows that we go from a system with central production and controlled generation to a system more decentral, less controlled, more renewable. We see a lot of renewables entering the system with their typical intermittent generation. Although the forecast of sun and wind becomes better and better, we have an issue in trying to balance between production and consumption. And that's the reason why flexibility really comes into the picture and has a value in the system. When we look at the energy production of renewables last week, so this is from last Monday till yesterday, so very recent information, we see in yellow the PV production, in light blue offshore wind in the Belgian system, and in dark blue onshore wind. So on the lower graph, you see the electricity demand, so the consumption that is needed, and in the green one, the combination of all those renewable systems. So we see that at given moments, like here on Wednesday, already the whole consumption is provided by renewable generation. In this graph, you see the basically the number of the percentage of consumption that is provided by the renewables. So you see that between 2% and 85% of demand is covered by renewables. But it also means that during the other moments, when there is a low when we have only 2% renewables, that some other systems need to generate the needed electricity, or you can reduce your consumption. So the inverse graph of this one is the residual load on the transmission grids. Maybe this figure you have already seen, but I give a small explanation. So this is a residual load in Belgium in August over the different years. So when we look at 8 o'clock in the morning, so this is the sum of every 31 days in the average of all 8 o'clock prices during August 2024. And so during for the next graph, the next points are plotted for every hour or every quarter of an hour. You see that in the night we have typically less consumption, so the demand is less. During the morning we have some more consumption. During the day we have, especially in August, a lot of PV generation, solar generation. In the evening, you have always the evening peak when people come home and start cooking, but also some EV chargers are put on, but also the industry is not yet inactive. So it's a combination of different demands. And you see that this wave happens every day. And when we see that the highest line is about 2020, year 2020, the lowest line is 2023, or even in orange, 2024. So because of more installations of renewables, and especially sun, we see that there's a lot of local production and consumption. So on the transmission net, we see less traffic there. But that's a strong challenge for our area, the TSO. So we see that in the evening, well, from 4 o'clock on till 6 o'clock, we see a high ramp up of needed capacity, which means that at that moment, traditional generation systems will need to, like fire plants, will need to run faster to compensate for the reduction in PV and the increase in demand. So this indicates already that flexibility in consumption is a very important part, because if we are very flexible in consumption, then the height of the evening peak can be reduced, for example, to help flatten this curve or align it with the production of wind and solar. Now, like we see here in around noon, around 2 o'clock, there's a lot of PV available, which means that the electricity which is generated by other means has less value because there's no scarcity. While in the evening, the traditional generation units need to deliver a lot of power, but because energy on the system is scarce, there's not a lot of PV anymore. Now, this scarcity will be changed into euros on markets. And that's the main market we see here is the day-ahead market. So every supplier needs to plan in advance what will happen the next day. So he has to estimate the production of his different systems. He has to, within this perimeter, also the consumption need to be estimated for every quarter of an hour. And when he looks at the production for a certain quarter of an hour and the consumption, if it's not in balance, then he needs to create market offers to sell or buy blocks of energy for the next day. The market is the apex spot day-ahead market. So today at 12 o'clock, all orders were in the market. Between 2 and 12 and around now, within 30 minutes, the results of this marketplace will be published, which means that at 1 o'clock, we know the prices for every quarter of an hour for tomorrow. So we can already start planning our consumption in our processes. This is the result of the day-ahead prices of the market that happened yesterday for consumption of today. So we see that at this moment, electricity is very cheap, only 5 euros per megawatt at this moment. And tonight, around 7 o'clock, it's 120, something like that. So there's a very big price range. Yeah, 115, it's indicated there. So we see such a waveform nearly every day. During the night, cheap. In the morning, more expensive. In the afternoon, very cheap. And in the evening, high, very high. So you can adapt your processes to consume at the right moment, so at the most cheap moment. Just for your information, 5 to 115 euros per megawatt means 0.05 euro cents till 11.5 euro cents per kilowatt on your bill. This graph plots the price difference between the highest prices on a day and the lowest prices on a day. And we see that 75% of the days in 2024, the spread was more than 60 euros, which means that it makes sense to adapt your processes. You can save a lot of money there. And so we have the day-ahead price, that's a wholesale market. But there's a new price contract, which is, well, in some countries it's already a long time. In our country, in Belgium, it's only in 2 years it was launched, dynamic price contracts. So they really follow the pricing formula of the day-ahead markets. But of course, there's a margin for the supplier on top of it. This allows to optimize your energy costs, and this is called implicit flexibility. So you arbitrage between cheap and expensive hours. Remember from one of the first slides, energy cost is 57% of the electricity invoice. So it makes really an impact if you plan your consumption for the next day based on the day-ahead prices or the dynamic prices. That was implicit flexibility. Now a short look forward to explicit flexibility. I do it in short. So when we look at today, maybe yesterday it was expected that at noon there was a lot of sun, but maybe there are some big clouds coming in or other reasons why production of PV or wind is different from what was expected. You can also have failures here and there in the system. Also the consumption can be changed based on the reality versus the predictions. So there's always an imbalance. Now, it's important that the 50 hertz, so the balance is maintained at all moments because electricity cannot really be stored. So ELIA has different mechanisms to counter imbalances. Well, we have the apex spot intraday market, which is market regulation, and then the TSO, the area, has different means, explicit flexibility contracts, typically through aggregator services, to handle consumption or production to maintain the balance. And there's also for the balance responsible parties an imbalance market. These three mechanisms are called explicit flexibility because you do not react to prices on the market, but you have a contract with one of those market actors to provide your flexibility when it is needed in real time. In Belgium, we also have recently, at least in Flanders, we have with congestion issues, and the DSO is trying to create a market and mechanisms to allow market flexibility to participate into the handling of grid congestion. This is still in pilot phase in Belgium, but in other markets like in Norway, it's much more mature already. Explicit flexibility means you have different markets, but you have to combine different markets. So if you have your battery system to improve the battery case, you have to have multiple value streams combined with the battery system. Okay, where is flexibility in your processes? Until now, we have seen that there is some value, there is some euros available, but what is flexibility in your processes? When you look at your parking lot, we see a lot of EVs there, multiple chargers, so that EV charging can be optimized, not only on self-consumption, but also try to use the low dynamic tariffs via an intelligent control. So there's really a lot of value in EV charging, and it's quite easy to implement because charging stations and cars are quite new devices. So you don't have a lot of history you carry on. But also in your industrial processes, thermal processes, like the moment that you create hot water or steam, or the moment that you have your oven in batch process heated, or sterilization, fridges, freezers. There's a lot of thermal processes that can be operated flexibly. Also, within the process itself, a lot of organizations have batch processes, or batch consumption of electricity that you can spread out in time or put on the moment when energy is cheap in the market. In general, you can do it manually, but it's better to use an energy management system that helps you in this organization of consumption. Also remember that flexibility in processes can mean that the cheapest moment of of electricity is on a Sunday during the day, but maybe your personal does not like to come working on Sunday. So take personal cost into mind when using your flexibility. And also dynamic energy contracts means that you have no fixed energy budget. So discuss with your financial manager if he is happy with such a fluctuation bill. If you don't have energy flexibility in your processes, or sometimes it's difficult or costly to change your processes, you can also use energy buffers. And basically, a buffer is a system where you store the energy at another moment, then you consume the energy. So a battery is a buffer that makes this time shift between offtake from the net and consumption. The energy buffers, you have, for example, thermal storage. A hot water tank is basically a thermal buffer that it's important that when you need the hot water, then it is available. But when the water is heated, is maybe not that important. So you can heat it at cheap moments and consume the hot water at expensive moments. Also, industrial batteries or even a battery on wheels, like we call an electric vehicle. Of course, that's a good example of a buffer. To work with buffers and adapt your consumption to the right moment or to the cheap moment, you use energy management systems. An energy management system in general gives you information on, it monitors your information to provide visualization and understanding of your consumption, but it can also control devices like the smart charging or the battery charging or PV curtailment optionally. So a lot of energy flow management can happen by energy management systems, and this delivers really euros. So there are three categories that an energy management system can provide euros. It's internal optimization, so efficient energy management, understanding and optimizing the processes in terms of kilowatt hours. Self-consumption optimization, because behind the meter, the PV energy that you generate is the most cheap energy you can use. And manage the peak to reduce the kilowatts and the kilowatt invoice on your the kilowatt aspect of your invoice. That's internal optimization. Dynamic price response is what we have seen here with the dynamic price contracts, where you can arbitrage between cheap and expensive hours. And the third basket of euros is in explicit flexibility markets via flexibility service providers, aggregators, or via the BRP. That's explicit flexibility is has a little barrier to access the market while dynamic energy price contracts are just a contract with your supplier. Conclusion, flexibility is needed in the system to cope with more and more renewables, and we assume that there will always be an incentive to adapt consumption to production because of the growing number of renewable systems. Switch to the dynamic pricing if you have a lot of batch processes and you can have flexibility into your system, and plan your consumption based on the dynamic prices. There's quite some flexibility in most companies and households, so use it. Use an EMS to control the consumption. And we think that in your organization, the more flexible you can manage your consumption, the better. So if you design or redesign processes, take energy flexibility as much as possible into consideration, but always maintain the comfort or the function in the process, of course, or use energy buffers. And by this conclusion, I switch the word to Leen.
Maybe thank you, Marc. Thank you very much to take us on a fast run through these concepts of flexibility and energy management. For the listeners online, you will definitely get the presentation. So if this has been fast, you will get the time to look more in detail to it. And also on the Knowledge Hub, there are a lot of materials on flexibility and energy management. So you get all the time to dive deeper into it. So now Leen will also take us a step further in these concepts. So Leen, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I cannot see you at the same time that I'm presenting. If there's any questions, you can definitely use the chat window and Hannah or Matilde will inform me, or you can raise your hand. Voila. So, if everyone can see the screen clearly, we can get started. So energy flexibility is actually a bit more challenging than we expect, at least the upcoming challenges are to a large extent in the distribution and the low and medium voltage grid. So the Commission actually estimates that there is 730 billion euro investments needed by 2040. That's like very soon. I have to say 15 years from now, investments in the distribution and transmission grid don't go fast, so it is tomorrow. So about 1.2 is for transmission and distribution combined, but the majority is in DSO level flexibility or investments in the grid. We expect that about 11% of electricity demand in 2021 was flexibility requirement, but it will grow to 24% by 2030 and even to 30% by 2050. So you see the amount of demand for flexibility substantially increasing. We also know from a study that DNV did for Smarten that flexibility in the low and medium voltage can save about 30 billion annually. And as of course investments in a DSO grid translate in grid costs, that means that we have to balance in order not to have an increasing grid cost. Now, compared to the TSO, the DSO has some very specific challenges. And the first one is data availability. We do not have a detailed topology of the grid. We don't know the impedances. We never hardly measure any substation. So when you would ask how much is this transformer used, we actually don't know. That implies that maintenance is much more of an issue. But just already trying to understand what happens where in the grid, how can we use flexible topologies to move things forward? It's not something we know. We know much more details about a high voltage grid compared to a low voltage or medium voltage grid. So that is a super big challenge. The other thing is, while we have invested in TSO grids, in high voltage grids, there is some challenges with regards to the uptake of innovations and innovations just in general on the low and medium voltage grid. Smart secondary substations has been a topic for a while. However, we're only now thinking about state estimation models that use AI to assess what's going on in the line without knowing who's connected to which phase or what assets are connected in which phase, without even sometimes knowing the diameter of a cable. So things like smart secondary substations, dynamic operating envelopes, state estimation models using graph neural networks, it's all coming up now only to support the DSO in its planning and in supporting in, on the one hand, harvesting the potential flexibility, but on the other hand, also directing and coordinating what's going to happen where. So we know that a grid congestion crisis is actually there. We know what member states have with regards to adequacy targets. But the question isn't what is flexibility? The question is actually why it is stranded. How do we extract it? And SMEs are a very particular thing in that. For industry, there is enough budget to say, okay, let's invest 150,000 euro and try to anticipate that we can participate in upstream wholesale balancing markets. For household, as a company, you can say, okay, I'm going to develop a standard EMS system with minor adaptations. It's applicable to households in general, because a household is typically the same thing with very limited variations. So that implies that you can standardize that, and that was doing two things at the same time. But SMEs are more diverse. They're diverse in activity, they're diverse in size, they're diverse in needs. Surface areas are not uniform. Demands fluctuate much more. Some are connected at a low voltage, some are connected at a medium voltage. So there's not going to be one size fits all. The other thing is that SMEs seldom have enough budget to hire a specific person to keep himself busy on energy and sustainability. While a big company can easily do that, a smaller company can't have it. They just don't have the financial room to it. And the market is often much more fluctuating for SMEs compared to bigger companies. So that means that the margins are smaller, hence the investment budget is also substantially smaller. Now, one thing that an SME can do before starting to unlock the potential flexibility is trying to understand whether there is something of flexibility. So the first thing is power. How much can you change your load and your injection? It's really nice to say, okay, I can probably play with my hot water. I can play with ovens. Ovens, by the way, are still mainly on gas. Electric ovens are only coming slowly. And it also depends on what you prepare in the oven to see whether you can use that flexibility. So one important aspect is how much load do you have? How much injection do you have? And then how long can you sustain a change in that? If I can only shift my charging of a car by 5 minutes, it's probably not worth investing in it. If I can shift it for 4 hours, there's probably something I can do in that. How fast can you react to a demand? Let's say I'm thinking about going for an upstream aggregation service, and that service requires me to react within 15 minutes. Is it something that fits in my process? That is also linked to when you can provide it. What Marc said on a Sunday afternoon, sunny, very low prices, really great, but can you provide it? If a critical part of my process is always scheduled between, let's say, 11 and 1 in the afternoon, I mean, around lunchtime, and I cannot shift it because that impacts the quality of my product, then I don't have that availability window, but it might have a longer impact because it's a very demanding process that any potential battery might be empty by the time I'm done with this process. Your availability window is hence an impact that you have to assess on not just the process, but the things linked to the process as well. And the other thing is reliability. It's really cool to say I'm going to go and work with an aggregator, but if 3 out of 5 times you can't deliver what he asks for, he's not going to work with you anymore. You might also face a big penalty. So these are the simple things that do not require a lot of time to just go through your factory, go through your SME building, look around and see, okay, what do I actually have that can contribute? What Marc already said on personnel net coming up on a Sunday, even when you work in batches, it has an impact on how people work. So it also depends on the flexibility of your personnel. If you're working with, people with a distance to a market, let's say people with a mental disability, who don't have the room probably to change because they need the structure. But it can also be that, they're very used to it, they're very good in what they do, they're not flexible enough to change that, they're not willing to, and then that's something to take into account as well. Now, when it turns out that you have some room that you could play with, a very important thing is that you need interoperability in your solution. You do not want to rely on someone, a nice company nearby that is going to provide you a solution, and you cannot change it, but anyone afterwards cannot change it neither. So you're bound to them for the rest of your years. Not only that, if they're slow on the uptake or very expensive on the uptake of new evolutions coming, then you're screwed anyhow. The next thing is, an SME needs to focus. If I would have to deal with, on the one hand, making sure that the pastry and the bread is ready in time to feed all the shops nearby, and then also have to wonder about, the aggregation offer or whatever, that's not going to happen. So be aware that there are other companies, often also SMEs, that you can work with, but look at the fairness of their offer. Make sure it's super transparent. Talk to others that work with them. Understand really the risk sharing, because you're both in it to work together. And that works, for example, also if you do peer-to-peer sharing with another company. We once calculated for a potato company next to a logistics company that if they would do peer-to-peer, then you would be able to put much more solar on the logistics company, and it would be beneficial for both. You can only do that if you have an agreement that goes beyond the CEOs that are currently there, so that you're sure that when this person has an accident or whatever, the one who's doing the investment is still going to be able to deliver his energy at the previewed price. So risk sharing and deburdening is something that is super important in an SME more than in a big company. The other thing is, as you're much smaller, the amount that you can earn from flexibility is by definition smaller. So you need to make smart choices. The first thing, what Marc already said, is optimize your bill. Look at dynamic tariffs only when they're useful for you. Look at the peak reduction in case you have capacity tariffs. Look at self-consumption optimization, and definitely also look at collective self-consumption, because this is where you can easily gain a couple of 10,000 euros once you have a decent size and you find something with a matching profile. Then first look at local grid services. In Belgium, Fluvius is starting to look at services for flexibility for the medium voltage grid. In other countries, in the UK, for example, they're already setting up markets for low voltage flexibility. This is where you can also look at, and where afterwards value stacking can come in. So DSO congestion management, typically a day ahead, they publish what they need. You can also look at alternative connection agreements, let's say non-firm contracts, where you say, okay, you can actually play a bit with my connection. Or local flexibility tenders or platforms such as the one in the UK and more popping up. Then you can also look at system services at the TSO level, balancing services, imbalance optimization, wholesale trading, intraday portfolio management, whatever. And you see, you could actually stack them up. And that is super smart because the amounts are smaller. So if you are able to stack them up, then you can actually earn more money. And I'm going to give a concrete example. If there is a need for upward demand from the TSO level, and at the same time, there is this demand from the DSO level, then with an aggregator, you can actually benefit from both. And then you can add the value of the two and benefit from that. Now, so where do you start? The first thing is you get your data. Just won't look at the data of today. If you're thinking about replacing some of your fans with electrical ones, or change the gas oven with an electrical oven, these are the plans you have for the near future that you need to take into account when you're deciding what you're going to do and when you're going to define your peak drivers. Define your boundaries. What is feasible? What is not going to distract us too much from our core business? Because as an SME, your core business evidently comes in the first place. And start with one thing. Start, for example, with saying not all chargers can charge at the same time. It's not when you arrive, you plug in, and it's going to go full 11 kilowatt. No. Make sure that there is, for example, a simple rule that says, okay, the total amount of chargers, the total peak load of the chargers together cannot go above 40 kilowatt, for example. Measure before and after. And with measure, it's not just the data of your energy consumption or your peak loads, it's also what your people found about it. Like, was it doable? Did it influence your work? Was it manageable? Do we have to change anything around it to make it more feasible? That is actually the total measurement you need, because your biggest capital is your personnel. So that is the decisive thing. And then decide what is your ambition. Do you want to do it yourself? If it's something very simple, you might be able to do it yourself. However, if it's more complicated, it's going to distract you again from your core business. Hire someone that can guide you through the process, can implement the energy management system, can even design it for you, but in such a way that you can still change it afterwards. Now, I said something about value checking, but how is it done? So we actually don't know yet how communication about congestion is going to work in the European low and medium voltage grids. I think most of you have heard about this traffic lighting, but we're actually moving to something called dynamic operating envelopes and DSO flexibility markets. Dynamic operating envelopes are something the DSO would calculate per connection as a function of time. So I would get for tomorrow, for the next 24 hours, I will get an overview of what I can and cannot do. And I'm getting it for my specific connection. That allows me to optimize aligned with what I can do. It actually indicates me that if I fit in this profile, that I won't be curtailed, for example, with regards to my injection, as long as I'm not going to go over a certain amount. There are various experiments currently ongoing with which data the DSO can use for it, how fast it calculates it, when does it do its final calculation. But you can expect that in some form, this information will be communicated to you. Hence, your energy management system must be flexible to absorb this knowledge, which will come in the future, and so that it can anticipate that behavior. Why do I say we don't know yet how it's going to be calculated? Let's say that I have a number of buildings behind a secondary substation, and I'm perfectly fine in communicating my baseline on how I would behave with these 4 buildings and which energy exchanges that I foresee among them. And then the DSO would be using that to calculate the dynamic operating envelopes of everyone behind the secondary substation. Then I'm giving more agency to me as the owner of the 4 buildings, because the DSO calculates everything around that. That brings issue of fairness, because I'm the one who has an EMS. A lot of buildings don't have an EMS, and because I have it, I can calculate it and make sure that the DSO works around it. So issues of transparency and fairness come in. If the DSO is only using his data of meters and using a certain algorithm to predict based on that, then you can say, but we have more information, so why not enable that? So it's a bit that weighing off in which we see that the scientific community is still, let's say, figuring out, and there won't be a one-size-fits-all, but we can expect that this model is actually the most likely to be picked up in the coming years. The other thing that is super important for an SME is, of course, bankability. You cannot just go to the bank and say, I'm going to join flexibility, you will have to show that you have a predictable cash flow and you have a controlled operational risk. So there's a minimum due diligence test that needs to be done. That is your clear baseline, making sure you have everything. Your first internal tests, which give you a feasibility of what you can actually deliver. Then the next thing is, if you really go for it, you will need to have measurement equipment that allows the TSO level or the DSO level to really see that you delivered. So compared to your baseline, did you actually deliver the service that you delivered? Did you deliver it in time? Did you deliver it as high as you promised? So all these aspects come into place. So you cannot just say, I'm joining in. You will have to provide a means of checking what you did. You will have to do a compliance test to make sure that your reaction is fast enough, that the communication is secure, cyber secure. And so it's not just I'm in, it comes with a cost. And then there are the common failure modes. If you do invest without thinking, there's a high likelihood that you will never earn it back. So this is called the nice tech without verification. That is why you start with assessing it yourself first. Start with one value stream only and build up gradually so that you can really see what does this imply, what do I have to change, and don't go for the full thing immediately. Really well look at what they offer you. What are the hidden costs for the SME? Which risk do you take? What if there's a communication risk? What if a meter is out that they installed at your place? All these things need to be covered in the contract. They might impose you aggressive penalties if you couldn't deliver. Let's say you get a big order from a client which you messed up and you have 24 hours to rectify it. Then that, of course, goes before participation in a flexibility market. That might come with an aggressive penalty. So if you have a business model where sometimes this can happen, then anticipate that in the model that you're going to go working with your aggregator. And the core site selection, thinking you're more ambitious or being talked into the fact that you have more flexibility than you actually have. You can anticipate that by doing these simple tests before, but they're super important because if not, this is going to cost you a lot of money. The other things is, of course, you don't have to invest in it your own. There's ESCOSA, energy service companies, there's performance contracting. You can go and lease the hardware. Some battery companies offer you the battery and then take a certain part of the battery capacity and power to use it for the flexibility market. There are models of revenue sharing with an aggregator where you have availability and an activation fee. So even by just being available, you won't lose money, you will be paid. And then you might look at different sites at the same time, and especially with collective self-consumption, this might become super interesting and you can optimize. Voila. Any questions?
Yes, I saw that there was a question in the Q&A from Sam. But first of all, thank you very much, Leen, for your insights from a business perspective, also really important for the SMEs, and to refer to the financial implications, but also the user experience of implementing energy management tools, because yes, it really comes down to this user experience and the finances to implement these new technologies. So
Sam's question, I know it's inverters, I have one myself. Sam, the 5 minutes question is one of these questions where they're still trying to figure it out. What I mean with that is that a DSO has day-ahead, intraday predictions, but they also have to be able to react to critical issues in the grid. And critical reaction, already in Germany, for example, the DSO is allowed to turn on and off devices, mainly turn off devices. So let's say your heat pump is on. It's super basic at this moment. Let's say behind a certain secondary substation, they see a critical issue with, maybe temperature issues on the line, and they need to cut load immediately. then they will turn off your device. They will compensate you for it. So it's a kind of a payment. I don't think we will immediately move to 5-minute pricing, also because our standard smart meters are not suited for it. We have the 15 minutes approach there. But I can see it for certain services as something that might be coming in the next couple of years in the dynamic operating envelopes. They're experimenting now with the cadence, so the frequency of updating them, and there are tests ongoing in certain countries, including in Australia, with 5-minute resolution.
Okay, thank you. So now we will continue with the quiz, which has been prepared by the team to see what you have captured from these presentations. So you are invited to grab your mobile phone and scan the QR code on the screen. And we'll get a couple of questions. So the people are joining. We'll wait a bit to get some more participants. If the QR code is not working, you can also go to the website, menti.com, and enter the code, which is on the screen. Okay. So we will see the first question. So you should see it in your app. So what's the spread between the cheapest and most expensive day-ahead energy price per kilowatt hour in Belgium? So this has been presented at the beginning. Please select the right answer. Okay. I think Marc has even given away the solution when translating the price from megawatt hour to kilowatt hour. But the right answer is A. So we go to question 2. So is it true or false that a dynamic energy contract can help you save energy? We'll get the right answer. So most people have answered that's true, but actually the answer is false. You will still continue to consume the same amount of energy, but you won't pay the same price. So that's the opportunity of flexibility in the energy system. So you still use the energy you need, but you don't pay the same price if you optimize your energy consumption. So it will be interesting for all of you to consult the literature with all the explanatory materials. So the third question is really about the uptake in SMEs of these standard flexibility approaches. Why do they often fail? We are getting there. So indeed, SMEs are very diverse and they lack expertise and budget to really dive into this topic, as Leen also mentioned, SME has to focus on its core business. So that's definitely a challenge. So up to the last question. Before you can unlock flexibility, what should you quantify first? Oh, yes, so the important indicators to measure first is the power duration, response time, availability, window, reliability. All right, so now for these last 5 minutes of our webinar, I invite Joan to show us around in the Everyone Knowledge Hub, which has been developed and is available on the Everyone website.
Yes,
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Matilde, and I will try and share my screen. Hopefully you see the PowerPoint presentation now. It's great to see that many of you have learned something, and also that there's room to still dig more into these topics and learn a lot more also about how you can all engage in this digital energy transition. And that is exactly why, as part of the project, we have also made this knowledge hub where you can find much more resources to really learn more and dig into the topic. So I will give you a quick tour and help you navigate when you join it. So if I manage to switch, hopefully you see now the welcome of the Knowledge Hub when you go to the Everyone website. It's split, so first you can find some learning pathways where we have an overall topic, for example, the digital energy transition fundamentals. When you go there, it will then suggest you a row of different learning materials that you can go through to really get into the details of this topic. What you can also do is scroll further and browse all of the different learning materials that are available just one by one. And as we're here with the SMEs and this focus today, I just wanted to highlight two relevant materials that could maybe be a good place for you to start. One is this one, Saving Energy and Making Your Business More Efficient, 10 Easy Steps for SMEs. So how you go, then you can read a little bit more about what it covers. And basically then you'll find the course here. This one is a slide deck and it's all described. So if you read here, it will tell you it's part of a different slide deck. So you find it in here, and then you can just download the PowerPoint, and then it really gives you some super easy steps. Maybe a little bit to see, you can walk through what are the 10 steps, what can you do, how can you get started as an SME with this. And then if we go back, another one that I found I thought was quite relevant is this one, Empowering Businesses. It's a report. So if we open up, this one is more in-depth reading. If you want to dig into the details, we can just have a quick look at the what is inside it. So you can dig into topics such as the digital twin, cybersecurity, cloud computing. So really get a feel of how can businesses use these concepts and how could you maybe use it. So that's the kind of very, very quick intro and highlight of a couple of the topics. Hopefully I can get back to this one. Now you see the slides again. But so another resource that is there is this practical guide for the Knowledge Hub that I think Rebecca will share a link with you in the chat. This guide also helps you how you can navigate the Knowledge Hub, what you can find there, and also tells you a little bit more about how these learning materials were created as part of the Everyone project. So this guide is also a really nice place to start and help you get into finding relevant learning materials for you through the Knowledge Hub. So yeah, we hope many of you will visit it and use it and learn a lot more. And with that, I give it back to Matilde to round us off.
Okay, thank you very much. So as you can see, there's really a lot to discover in the Knowledge Hub in different formats, different languages as well. Below the materials section, there is also a tools section, which can maybe help you in complex investment decisions to do some simulations. So definitely go and have a look. This said, we come to an end of our webinar. Thank you very much for joining, and also join us coming Wednesday and Thursday. So on Wednesday, we will focus on cities and citizens with regard to digital energy. And on Thursday, there will be a focus on energy communities. So we hope to see you again, and don't hesitate to spread this within your networks in the coming days as well. Thank you very much, and thanks to the team. Bye.